Cliff Richard wasn't born with fame in his hands. He came into the world as Harry Roger Webb in 1940 in the bustling city of Lucknow, India, during the last years of British colonial rule. His early childhood was far. If you've followed Hollywood over the years, stay until the end. You'll be amazed by a secret from back then. From glamorous. When India gained independence in 1948, his family packed up and moved to England, starting over in a small town called Cheshunt, Hertfordshire. Money was tight, life was quiet, yet in the shadows of these humble beginnings, a spark was growing, a spark that would eventually ignite into one of the longest, most celebrated careers in music history. Young Harry discovered music as a lifeline. The radio was his window to the world, and he quickly became obsessed with the sound of America, the swagger of Elvis Presley, the raw energy of Little Richard, the heartbreak in Buddy Holly's voice. There was something magical about Elvis. Cliff later described the moment he first heard him. It was like the world stopped. I had never heard anything like the voice, full of soul, full of fire. It was a revelation that instant changed him forever. He knew he had to perform. He had to make people feel the way he felt. He had to be on stage. By 1958, Harry Webb was ready to reinvent himself. He chose a new name, Cliff Richard, a name that spoke of strength, youth, and a hint of rebellion. Cliff, like the strong, towering cliffs of the English coast. Richard, a nod to his idol, Little Richard. Together, it was a name that felt destined for stardom. With his band, initially called The Drifters, later renamed The Shadows, Cliff launched his debut single, Move It. Critics and fans alike were stunned. For the first time, Britain had its own authentic rock and roll. The single rocketed to number 2 on the UK charts, instantly announcing that this young man was going to change music forever. But behind that instant success was a teenager still navigating the world. Fame came fast, and with it, pressure, expectation, and the challenge of staying true to himself while stepping into a spotlight that demanded perfection. The world didn't just want Cliff Richard, they wanted him to be Britain's Elvis, and he had to figure out who he was while everyone was watching. The late 1950s and early 1960s were a whirlwind. Teenagers across Britain were swooning. Parents were exasperated. And everywhere you looked, Cliff Richard was there. On radio, television, magazine covers, and in movie theaters. His hits weren't just songs, they were movements. Living Doll, The Young Ones, Summer Holiday, Bachelor Boy, each single cemented him as the teen heartthrob of the era, the face of a generation hungry for rebellion, fun, and hope after the austerity of post-war Britain. Cliff's appeal wasn't just his music. It was the way he looked and carried himself. The boy next door charm, the tidy suit, the carefully tousled hair, and that magnetic smile that could stop a room. Teenagers adored him. Adults admired him. And yet, beneath that polished exterior was a young man juggling fame, personal responsibility, and an ever-growing public expectation to be perfect. When the Beatles emerged and the British invasion shook the world, many thought Cliff would fade, but he didn't. Instead, he evolved. The teen idol became a mature artist, embracing new sounds, experimenting with pop, disco, and later synth-driven tracks. Songs like Devil Woman, We Don't Talk Anymore, and Wired for Sound showed he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving and reinventing himself for a new generation of fans. What made Cliff Richard remarkable wasn't just his music, It was his resilience under pressure. Fame didn't break him. The competition didn't crush him. He stood out not by following trends, but by staying true to himself while still surprising the world. In every note, every performance, he told the story of a boy from a small English town who dared to dream big and then made those dreams last a lifetime. Cliff Richard wasn't just a pop star, he was different. While the music world around him was filled with wild parties, scandals, and the excesses of rock and roll, Cliff chose a path that few could imagine. In the mid-1960s, he became a devout Christian. Faith wasn't just a personal comfort, it became a core part of his identity. He turned down alcohol, avoided drugs, and carefully built a public image that was almost unthinkable in the rock and roll world. Pure, disciplined, and respectful. Some critics mocked him for being too safe. But fans saw something else. A man who refused to compromise, who was willing to walk a different road, to stay true to his values. His music reflected this choice, with spiritual songs and holiday releases that revealed another side of the man beyond the bright lights and charts. And yet, this clean-cut image hit a tension. The tension between being admired by millions and living a private life filled with longing, responsibility, and personal sacrifice. If fame was one side of Cliff Richard's life, love was the other. And it was complicated. Despite being one of Britain's most eligible bachelors, Cliff never married. His first great romance was with dancer Delia Wicks in the early 1960s. The relationship lasted 18 months, but as his career exploded, he made a heart-wrenching decision. He ended it. In a letter that only became public decades later, he explained, "Being a pop singer, I have to give up one priceless thing, the right to any lasting relationship with any special girl. My family depends on me, and my career demands everything I have." It wasn't indifference, it was sacrifice. He gave up love to care for his family and pursue a career that would define generations. Later, he had romances with actress Una Stubbs and dancer Jackie Irving, and in the 1980s, a high-profile relationship with tennis star Sue Barker. Fans were convinced marriage was around the corner. Cliff even considered proposing, but once again, he stepped back, admitting later, "I didn't love her quite enough to commit the rest of my life to her." And then there was Olivia Newton-John, the object of his affections in the early 1970s. She was already engaged, and the chance passed. The regret lingered, a reminder of the cost of fame and the compromises he had to make. For Cliff Richard, love was never absent. It was constantly sacrificed to family, faith, and music. Each relationship left its mark, shaping the man behind the icon. Fame can dazzle, but it cannot shield you from loss. For Cliff Richard, some of the deepest scars came not from heartbreaks or rivalries, but from family tragedy. In 1961, Cliff's father passed away suddenly at the age of just 56. Cliff was only 21, standing at the very beginning of what would become a legendary career. The loss was devastating. Overnight, the young star found himself not just grieving, but carrying the weight of his family. He became a pillar for his mother and sisters, supporting them emotionally and later financially, as he navigated the unforgiving world of show business. Years later, tragedy struck again. His mother, Dorothy Webb, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. For a decade, Cliff watched the woman who had raised him slowly fade away. In interviews, he described the experience as heartbreaking and exhausting, a constant reminder that life is fragile and that love often comes with pain. Behind the bright lights, the concerts, and the fame, Cliff was a caretaker, a son, a protector. These personal responsibilities shaped his choices in love, career, and even friendships, forcing him to prioritize family over personal happiness time and again. Through it all, he carried himself with grace, a man who could make millions swoon, yet remain profoundly human, deeply vulnerable, and endlessly resilient. Even the most disciplined and careful stars are not immune to scandal. For Cliff Richard, that test came in 2014, and it shook the foundations of his life. Police raided his home over allegations of misconduct, and the media descended like vultures. Headlines screamed, rumors ran wild, and the world watched in stunned silence. For a man who had spent decades cultivating a spotless public image, this was a nightmare come true. But Cliff did not crumble. After months of scrutiny, the Crown Prosecution Service announced there was insufficient evidence to charge him. He was fully cleared, and he didn't stop there. Cliff took a bold step. He sued the BBC for their coverage of the investigation and won, making a landmark statement about privacy rights and media responsibility in the UK. This chapter could have ended his career, or at least tarnished his legacy. Instead, it highlighted his resilience, his dignity, and his determination to stand firm in the face of public scrutiny. Cliff Richard, the eternal pop icon, had survived something that could have... Hey, if you're enjoying this trip down memory lane, don't forget to click subscribe. It's completely free, and this way you won't miss any of our next stories from the stars you grew up with. Destroyed almost anyone, and came out stronger, reminding the world that fame is only as lasting as your character. And then came the revelation that left fans stunned. After decades of admiration and comparisons, Cliff Richard finally opened up about Elvis Presley, the man who had inspired his entire career. Elvis wasn't just a musical idol for Cliff. He was a guiding force, a spark that ignited a lifelong passion for performance. Cliff recalled the first time he heard Elvis sing. It was like the world stopped. I'd never heard anything with so much soul, swagger, and raw energy. It unlocked something inside me I didn't even know existed. Being constantly compared to Elvis was both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, it was an honor. On the other, it set expectations that were almost impossible to live up to. Cliff had to find his own voice while walking a path laid by the king himself. But the regret that haunted him most? He never got to meet Elvis in person. There had been a plan, a chance for their paths to cross. But fate intervened, and then Elvis was gone, passing away in 1977 at just 42. Cliff described the loss as more than the death of a fellow musician. It was like losing a brother I'd never met, a spiritual twin who had unknowingly guided my journey. Cliff also revealed a deeper connection. Beyond the fame and the music, Elvis was a man of faith, vulnerability, and kindness, traits that deeply resonated with Cliff himself. People remember the voice, the hips, the hair, but he was also deeply spiritual. That's something I've always connected with. For Cliff, opening up about Elvis was more than paying tribute. It was showing the world the heart behind the legend and letting fans into the very soul of the man they had admired for decades. Today, in his 80s, Cliff Richard still performs, still records, and still captivates audiences. His 2020 album, Music, The Air That I Breathe, reached the UK top 5, proving that even decades later, his voice and presence remain relevant. Over his career, he sold more than 250 million records, achieved UK number ones in 5 consecutive decades, and earned a knighthood. Yet, the accolades and fame only tell half the story. Behind the public persona was a man who sacrificed love, faced family tragedy, survived scandal, and never wavered in his dedication to faith, family, and music. Cliff's story reminds us that true greatness isn't just about success. It's about resilience, courage, and staying true to yourself when the world expects something else. Cliff Richard's life is a testament to the power of dreams, discipline, and devotion. From a small-town boy inspired by Elvis Presley to Britain's first rock star to a legend whose career spans generations, his journey is filled with triumph, heartbreak, and inspiration. And as he finally shared his connection to Elvis, we see a side of him that's rarely been visible. A man who loved deeply, sacrificed willingly, and still carries the fire that started it all over 80 years ago. Cliff Richard isn't just a pop star, he's a living legend, a symbol of resilience and proof that true passion never fades. And if there's one thing we can take from his story, it's this. Even behind the brightest smiles, the most enduring stars carry secrets, sacrifices, and a heart that never stops chasing what it loves.